Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 100, a major milestone for the show. Thank you for joining us. Today we got Tipi and Marco Santini joining us, two amazing artists with connections to the traditional art world as well as NFTs on the blockchain. Thank you for joining us, Tipi and Marco. How are you doing today?
Doing amazing. Congratulations. Episode 100. That's a huge achievement. We're very grateful to be here.
Thanks, Marco. How are you doing, TP?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me back. I love it. I love hanging out with friends and meeting new people. And it's the one thing that I love about Web3 is the conversations. So this is very exciting. I'm happy. It's making my week.
I love that. I appreciate that, honestly, so much. And that is what Web3 is all about. Before we went live, you know, Marco was mentioning the Web3 Warriors as a movement, and I love that. I love that mentality, and that's definitely been what we've been focused on kind of from day one, is really trying to harness, you know, what is happening in Web3. And I was just so inspired by the conversations that I was having with a lot of artists and creators in the space, and realizing that we could never really get like fully under the hood and like really get in depth with the conversations, because a lot of the times we were in rooms with like 50 to 100 other people or whatever the case might be. And so that's really what inspired this show, Web3 Warriors, and it's really been an eye-opening experience to be able to have in-depth conversations with people from across the blockchain. I want to thank all of our listeners, all of our guests over the 100 episodes. Really, it's just been more than anything inspiring to hear the feedback, I think, from the listeners of the show, and really those especially who maybe don't know that much about blockchain and Web3, and they tell me, you know, it's really inspiring to hear from artists who have been able to lean on the blockchain and on crypto technology to actually, you know, support their local community or invest in a school for girls or whatever the case might be. You know, just really being able to help push things in the right direction on a social level, on an economic level, and really just kind of promote economic sovereignty and freedom in this new kind of technically savvy way. And we also often say, you know, we coming from a kind of gaming perspective, and the idea that the NFTs really are kind of gamifying life, you know, like they're bringing this new digital opportunity to any creator out there in the world to extend into the digital world and actually get real world value from it. Like, there are ways to sell stuff online of course, prior to crypto, and that's great, but they were always needing kind of mediators, right? And there was a lot of friction, and if you were in certain jurisdictions in the world, maybe you wouldn't be able to use that platform and pay the creator. And now all of that's kind of been pushed away, and we've got peer-to-peer opportunities. We've got the ability to help creators directly, and that is what Web3 Warriors is all about. So with us being on episode 100 now, we really wanted to kind of focus back to the roots of the show, which is the creator economy, but also specifically how NFTs and the blockchain are really disrupting the traditional art markets, right? And so we've seen the kind of narrative from day one, you know, when Tipi and myself were on Clubhouse and enjoying the conversations around kind of this revolution that was seen in NFTs. Most of the benefits that we saw was what I just mentioned, as far as cutting out the middlemen, the middle people, but also being able to see future earnings as a creator, right? To be able to make money from future sales of your art on the blockchain through royalties, and really be able to connect with your collectors directly through kind of peer-to-peer support, and being able to basically create a little bit more immersive experiences for your collectors, for your supporters. And that extends, of course, also into the metaverse, right? So we're going to be looking at kind of those high-level benefits of Web3, of NFTs, and we want to hear about it from Marco's perspective, from TP's perspective, and how we see it evolving, you know, maybe some of the hurdles that we have seen in the space. You know, we started back at the beginning of 2022 with the show, right on the tail end of kind of the last big bull market. I mean, we've definitely seen a lot of differing perspectives, a lot of ups and downs in the art space, in the NFT space specifically, but even just the more broadly, the crypto space, between regulations, between, you know, exchanges like FTX going belly up. So it's been quite a ride, you know. So we want to bring it back to the art, bring it back to really the inspiration for the show, and what I think is really the inspiration for NFTs as they're currently understood, which is being able to put your art on the internet and sell it through crypto technology, through peer-to-peer technology, in a way that creates more opportunities, not just for yourself, but actually for the collector as well, to be able to be part of. So we're also seeing that adoption continues to grow, while maybe not quite reaching the height that it was once at in 2021, 2022, but there are a lot of artists still making a way for themselves, you know. And so we're going to hear from Marco, we're going to hear from Tipi, and really see, you know, what does that journey look like for the artists right now, and what are some of the ways that maybe those of us who want to see NFTs and blockchain and Web3 succeed can help make that a reality, or help push things in the right direction, right? And so ultimately, I'll land my plane here. I really think that the artist experience should be a joyful one, you know, and I think that there's been a lot of kind of tension in the space, looking at, you know, having to fight for attention of the collectors, but also just the narratives, right? There's been initially, NFTs were empowering the artists. They were creating royalties. They were creating systems of accountability for the artists and connections between them and their creators, you know? And so I think we should be looking to kind of return to that and be less focused on, you know, making a big bag or going to the moon, or necessarily, you know, making a killing on meme coins or whatever the case might be. How can we refocus the conversation around the art, around wellness, around bringing better opportunities to artists, and not just saying, you know, forget the traditional art world and just jump into NFTs. Instead, maybe NFTs and the blockchain should just be an additional component to help you kind of expand your repertoire, as it were. So that's kind of my thoughts around art, and just to get the ball rolling, get us thinking about where we see things going and where we are right now. So with that, I do want to specifically welcome Tipi and Marco Santini. Maybe before we dive into all the Web3 NFT talk, for those who maybe didn't catch either of you on past episodes, we'll get just a little bit of a breakdown of your artistic background and what brought you to Web3. We'll start with you, Tipi, if you don't mind. Can you just share a little bit about your artist background and your experiences in NFTs so far? Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Okay. Well, my art background before I was in Web3, my education background, but my art background was I basically identified as an artist from a very young age, and my very first job was as an apprentice picture framer, and I was 15 years old. So I learned all about matte cutting, glass cutting, framing, and all of that. And I've had various jobs like that. even as recently as maybe 7 years ago, I worked in a shop where we were doing embroidery. We were doing very, sign making and different things. So understanding all of the different machinery and things it's really fascinating when we talk about output and IRL physical pieces and works. So working with traditional photography and working with different kinds of painting or laminating or things like that, all the different kinds of tools of the trade. So that's some of the background that I have with training with output. I have been a graphic and web designer for learning web design through books, self-taught, and did my first websites through Qt FTP and I'm Gen X, by the way, and Notepad. I wrote all my websites with code on Notepad. There was no programs, so I would upload the code and make websites for clients, and I did that for a lot of outfitting companies here in the north of Canada. So that's more my digital background. I'm also an environmental science graduate working with traditional environmental knowledge and Western science through a program called the Center for Indigenous Environmental Research with the University of Manitoba. And so we had 3 different professors for each course, where normally in traditional post-secondary education, you don't have one. I had a Western science professor that was educated through Western science, and then an indigenous professor that originated from a First Nation community that went through post-secondary education. So teaching through their lens, the paradigm of First Nations, more cyclical teachings. And then we also had elders from different nations across Canada, United States, that we were given exams on those. So oddly, it was quite different experiences from different elders. So definitely speaking to the diversity of the Indigenous identities, even just here in the North. So all of that kind of accumulates to the understanding of artists. And so I started an artist co-op, and it was a focus on Indigenous artworks. And it was a physical shop. The idea was really kind of bringing forth some of the identities and biases that we have in arts, and also trying to further the acknowledgement of the First Nation community. So that included writing. Even I had authors that were reading in the teepees for the children and things like that. So in the artist shop, I did graphic and web design. I had artists. I had made a website where the artists, I did web pages for each of the artists so that you could connect and see for more of their works, so that it was a digital representation of some of the artists in the shop. And some people maybe didn't make it to the shop because they were further away. I had some incredible artists that were more recognized in Canada that were part of the shop, but they weren't. They were part of the website, but they weren't part of the shop. Anyways, it was all about the idea of being able to connect with Indigenous artists. And in that space, of course, I was inclusive. There was community members that wanted to be part of it. They wanted to be included. And I live in an Icelandic community called Gimli here in Manitoba. So there was a lot of Icelandic and Ukrainian folks that wanted to be part of the shop as well. And I'm like, of course, I would do that. So anyways, that's what a co-op is.
No
so
doubt.
Anyways, that is my background in art, and then came into Web3, but we'll leave it for that one for now, how I got into Web3.
I appreciate that. It's very cool. I love the tangible kind of art that you were working with, and then you're kind of jumping into the digital space in the 90s and that kind of era of website creation and all of that. So very cool background, and the art university community is very, very cool, and definitely we'll touch on the Indigenous culture piece as well for sure. Marco, I'd love to hear a little bit about your artist background and what brought you to Web3.
Sure. My name is Marco Santini. I am an impact artist. I like to say that I mirror the spirit of communities around the world through collaborative creative designs. I do a lot of different things in a lot of different mediums, but I grew up in a very creative household where my father was an architect, my mother was a choreographer, and was always considered like just tinkering and playing with all these different things, and didn't realize that art could be a profession until 2018, when I basically started pursuing art professionally. Started out through gift giving and creating custom gifts. Every time I would go to a wedding, a birthday, or a party, anytime I had to invest in a gift, I would basically invest in myself and start creating. And it really just started to amplify in terms of weddings and live paintings and collaborations. I studied linguistic anthropology at Brown University and had no idea what I was going to do with that. But then one night I came home and wrote the word love in over 100 languages inside of a heart. It really resonated with a lot of people. And I put it up around the streets of New York City to spread love. And it kind of exploded overnight. Whereby I was live painting at Fortune 500 companies, weddings, charities, bar mitzvahs, galas, the United Nations. Got to paint for their General Assembly in 2019.
Wow.
And was doing all different art styles, still resonating back to my educational roots, where I do a lot of work with schools and charities. I'm actually painting a school in a few days in the Bronx, where I go and I ask the students what's important to them, gather all their words, I show them how to use spray paint, and then we create a beautiful collaborative mural together. But specifically with Web3, I was fascinated originally with NFTs as provenance. And I think that being able to show who owned what at what point and to know exactly is kind of a beautiful aspect for artists to just have awareness if they want to, go to the next level and have people all around the world having your work. And so I turned to that in 2021, selling my first few individually. I've only sold about 15 NFTs in my career, but everyone has been attached to a physical, and everyone has very luckily sold for 5 figures. And so I've kind of been looking at it as an addition to kind of higher end artworks. And when I launched in 2022, my signature series, I started this new idea whereby I take really rare, valuable signed books by some of the art masters, Basquiat, Picasso, O'Keeffe, Dali, and rather than having these books withering away on the bookshelves, collecting dust, not being appreciated, I actually read through them, cut them up, create new artworks out of them, and then got into Web3 specifically to think about what would these great artists be creating if they were alive today. And so I didn't go to art school, so I studied all of them. I tried to get in their minds and then tried to figure out what they'd be creating. And that led me down this very interesting rabbit hole of community and in-person and digital interaction. And I've just been loving this beautiful journey. I actually got to meet you multiple times now. There are in-person events that we can connect at, and just very, very grateful that what I have to share is resonating with people.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I believe when we met in Miami, you had the physical of the Basquiat book, I believe, kind of cut up there, and I couldn't believe it. And then I didn't make the connection to the NFTs, and you kind of explained the phygital concept, and I don't think you were new to the word phygital, I believe, as well. So it was kind of like we were both like, oh, this is really fascinating. And then thank you for joining the show initially, and then we've had you back on to kind of talk about your journey. Very, very cool. So Tipi, maybe we'll turn it over to you as far as the Web3 side of it. What kind of pulled you into Web3 before we take it back to the art? But what's your Web3 origination story?
Oh, I feel like I've said this so many times. This is your part for me. It's like, it's a lot. Okay, so again, back to the environmental science graduate, and also the idea that I've been creating for clients digital works for 20 plus years. And so that's my background of working with clients and creating what they want for them. So after I had my artist co-op, which I ended up having to go bankrupt, I couldn't afford to do both as a single income homeowner, and also pay for another facility. I had I wasn't able to do it for as long as I hoped. I'm still hoping to go back to that. That's a little later story. But when I was done that, I was also, as a First Nation person, I was on the class action. I was an eligible claimant on the class action suit against the government of Canada for a 60 scoop, meaning that I was a survivor of the First Nation representatives that were taken from homes in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so we were receiving a settlement for that. And I was trying to figure out how to, where I would invest that, how I would invest those monies in a way that would be sustainable and bring something back to my children. So I was looking at ESGs, which were kind of ethical shares in different businesses. And one of the ideas was that there was an option to do where you invest very literally in businesses that have potential to offer sustainable options, or you could go into a business as a shareholder and look to change it from the inside out and help them evolve, which it was called being God, I can't remember the terminology now. An insider activist. And I like the idea of being an insider activist. It's a lot. I'm an optimist in nature. I totally am. And I think that, when we align with people and we align in a supportive way rather than a versus way, we can make a lot of change. So I like the idea of being an insider activist. And I wasn't sure about crypto, and it wasn't really crypto that motivated me to come into Web3. Was actually my eldest daughter. Sage was in Clubhouse, and she was working in social media with some different stuff on branding. And she said, "Mom, there's a lot of art stuff going on in here. There's a lot of art conversations." It was COVID. And so I kind of went into, when you worked in that app, it gave you some options of interest. Like, what are you interested in? I was like, investing. I was interested in sustainability and eco options and art. Photography. I was also currently in the film industry. God, every time I talk, there's something else that I'm doing. But anyways, working in the film industry. So I had all these different criteria that I was interested in. And all of a sudden, NFT rooms started popping up. And so I decided, I'm going to check this out. There was a lot of kind of virtue signaling, which is really, I see a lot as somebody who's in social justice, environmentalism, as an Indigenous woman, as a vegan. And I always thought, we have to be very careful when we walk that line. Again, that teaching of walking the line between humility and pride is really recognizing where your allies are and who has potential to be an ally. So I really thought I could do something. And the other piece of that was I really like to be a strong advocate for underrepresented communities, meaning I'll hold space. So I started a club almost immediately because there was a lot of us that weren't able to speak in some of the spaces. We just wouldn't be given the time. So I said, it's okay, we'll just have a little cafe over here. So we literally called it the Creators Co-op, surprise, surprise. And had a lot of different multilingual communities in there, multi-chain at the very beginning. I was on Wax first, Tezos, Ethereum, Matic. I'm on my 14th chain now. 14th wallet. So so that whole space was really looking at we were at a cafe downtown, and everyone, all these big rooms were downtown. They were downtown. We were the little village.
No doubt.
So that's kind of really how my mind is, I guess. I'm a rural northern woman. My brain clearly thinks that way. So anyway, so that's when I was in Web3. I started in February 2021. I set up NFTP as a website in January 2021. And so since then, I was pretty much just jumped right in there. Insider activist all the way.
I love it. I love it. I love that you were starting from an investment standpoint. And really, I also love that your co-op, like basically it's multicultural in Gimli, or it was, right? And then the way that kind of background helped you when you jumped into the Clubhouse space and into the artist co-op that you created on Clubhouse to really harness that same kind of multicultural openness, and also making sure that you're making space for everyone. Because definitely it got to a point in a lot of those rooms where you either had to have a really loud voice and just start talking over people, or just hope that people would give you the time of day. But I can see what you did and what you carved out has been really great, and I still see people commending you for what you did back in those days. I think making the space for a lot of those artists that were really struggling to kind of be heard. So really appreciate that, and I love how your experience in the traditional art world jumped into Web3, and you just kept kind of being a host and a voice for that kind of narrative in the space. So very cool, very cool. Thank you both for. Yeah, sure.
Just wait. What I just want to add context for Marco, if he wasn't, or anybody that's listening that wasn't in Clubhouse. Clubhouse was a room. It was an audio app where it was different to spaces like Twitter Spaces where you can have 10 people. In those rooms, you could have as many people as you wanted on stage. And it was like, will somebody invite me on stage even at all? And then you basically, it was like skipping, double Dutch skipping, where you go like, hey, and it was like, are people rude or not? Or it was just a very survive or die kind of space. So anyways, I just wanted to add some context there. So when we say most people didn't have a chance to speak, I was very, very much orderly and like everybody can come up. I'd invite every single person. It was top heavy in my spaces, and everybody just took their turn to speak like a sharing circle.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And that's where we met first. And so it's really cool to continue the conversations through to today, where we're trying to build some stuff out here locally as well. So just really exciting to kind of look back and think about, how far we've come and where we're going from here. So with that, thank you for the introductions. Really great points all around. Marco, I love that you mentioned the provenance, because when I kind of, during my intro, was talking about the benefits, I think about cutting out the middle people. I think about, being able to get royalties into the future and actually connect directly with your collectors and your buyers, supporters through the blockchain. And then I think about immersive experiences, the metaverse, being able to add all kinds of utility to these NFTs. But that really basic timestamp of the provenance is hugely important, right? And being able to actually, it speaks to data, it speaks to the importance of the data, right? So my kind of opening question that I'm going to be asking is kind of, what is the state of art on the blockchain, and how do you kind of see us going from here, as kind of a overarching question? But specific to your point about provenance, Marco, how important is that? And do you think that point is being acknowledged widely out there, kind of in the art space? Do the Sobeys and the other kind of big platforms for traditional art, do you think that they're or the Sotheby's, sorry, do you think that they're actually seeing the value in that, just the provenance, just the tech being able to kind of keep that kind of data? How do you think that kind of piece of the equation is being understood more broadly, like outside of Web3?
Personally, I think the state of art on the blockchain is incredibly diverse and strong. You see a lot of different chains, a lot of different people coming in, different styles, different mediums. I'm inspired by that. To your other point, I do not think provenance is being held as much of a benefit as it should be, because especially with my works in terms of rare signed books, but just to know the validation that someone was there, that this was agreed upon, that we know that this is true, I think is something beautiful that the blockchain can provide, that I know at least American politics, no one knows what's right or wrong and true and not true. And it's like, there's so much just gray smoke everywhere, and just there's so much lack of clarity. And I think that blockchain can provide a lot of clarity for art, for provenance, and for creativity. Amongst all your different questions, I think specifically for myself, it's given me incredible opportunities to connect with icons and to have huge opportunities. I found and created an illuminated book that was signed by Beeple, posted it back then on Twitter, and within 10 days, he's reposting it, and I'm meeting him at a Christie's Art and Tech Summit. Like, that's the power of Web3, that people are open for the most part, wanting to help, and just like rooting for each other, which I feel like is an abundance mindset as an artist, not scarcity, like, oh, I need to win, I need to be better than them. Like, I feel like once you get to that next level as a, not only artist, but as a human, you can feel comfortable in your own skin, what you're doing, creating, and sharing that with the world. The other beautiful component is, as we touched on earlier, the idea that it's not just digital experiences, but in-person physical experiences. And one really beautiful thing that I wanted to share with you was a huge kind of professional milestone of sorts. And it really talks about the idea of, it's really based on the idea of resilience. So I was at Art Basel last year, and I was asked by Maker's Place, who I did launch the signature series with, to be part of a after party for the first ever Ordinals conference. And I talked to them. I was like, oh, well, I've painted at conferences, I've spoken at conferences. Is there any way I can connect with the main team? And they're like, no, they don't want to do that. Like, you're just going to do our thing, and it'll be great. And I was very happy with what they did, but I did a little digging, and I'm like, I actually have worked with this team before. And so I connected with the people who were throwing the event. Not only was I hired and paid to paint at the event, but I ended up connecting with the main sponsor, Gamma. And through this incredible relationship and through mutual respect and seeing my work and my style, Gamma has actually brought me in to be creating an illuminated first edition Bitcoin magazine for a Sotheby's launch in a few weeks.
What? Congratulations. Wow. That's epic, man.
Yeah.
One thing leads to another, eh?
It's crazy and it's beautiful, but it's this idea that if you fight for yourself and you show up and you do what you say you're going to do, you know, the world will just kind of conspire in your favor. And I feel like that's part of the Web3 mentality, is that there's a lot of sharing, there's a lot of learning, everyone's kind of in this together. And I know there's a range in every world, in every community, but I just feel very excited by the possibilities of what I'm seeing so far.
I love that. I love that. Making connections. Congrats. So that's going to be at the next Art Basel Miami, or where's that event?
It will be from May 22nd to May 29th.
Okay.
It will be I cut up the physical version. It was so rare and crazy to get my hands on it. I read through the whole thing cover to cover.
How old would that be? When was the first Bitcoin magazine?
May 2012. So about
2012,
3.5 years after Bitcoin was launched. Vitalik wrote almost every single article in that issue. Nice. I read it cover to cover, and like a process that usually takes me about 2 months to read through, understand, take notes, cut up, paint, create digital, like I had to do in less than 2 weeks for their deadline. But I really am excited by it, and just kind of, you know, I think the other idea of an abundance mindset is like we believe in ourselves and that's why we show up. But I think there is this kind of egocentric social proof or being in the right place or getting, you know, just praise from other people that can kind of kick in the door a little once in a while. And just to be part of this and to know that they're valuing my ideas and the style. Like they brought me into this auction without even having the final piece. Like they said, we want you to do this for this, and like trust
amazing
creativity to make something they haven't even seen yet that I'm going to be, you know, selling with them. So it's just
but it kind of goes back to you advocating for yourself, right? And being able to have that proof of concept on these different books that you've done, and most lately with people. I love what you mentioned about, you know, Web3 really pushing aside kind of the scarcity mindset and embracing the abundance mindset, right? And we also often say, you know, it's about collaboration over competition, you know, and being able to build together and actually collaborate. So I love that, you know, Beeple was so receptive to your work of art that, you know, that he had signed, right? Can you just explain a little bit more about that? I know you had the opportunity to sit down and interview him. So how did that lead to, you know, those opportunities, and where do you see kind of the trajectory for yourself going from here?
Totally crazy. So I get my hands on a book signed by Beeple. I cut it up. I create an illuminated design. I posted on Twitter at the time. Ended up showing it to Dean at the Cosmo team, who's like, I'm gonna be with Beeple this weekend, let me show him. And he shows it to him, and he's like saying all these nice things. I'm like, that's cool. Like, did he actually say it? Like, it was like kind of just a hesitancy. Like, I felt really good about it. But then a few days later, he posted on his page. It gets like over 50,000 views in a day. Like, it just was huge for me. And then a few weeks later, I ended up meeting him at the Christie's Art and Tech Summit, and he's like, oh, you're the guy who cut up my book. And he pulls out his phone and he like shows me the image on his phone. It's like totally surreal.
Right.
And I would love to, like, I had gotten offers to sell that piece, but I was like, I would like to gift this to you. And he's like, come down to South Carolina. I want to show you my place, the museum, the studio, all this stuff. And we'll interview him for my Illuminated series. So I went down there with my wife, and just seeing how, I mean, studying the book aside, like I truly didn't know his true genius until I understood his work and his story. And I'm very impressed by everything. Totally well-deserved, everything that's ever happened to him. But going down there, it's just so meticulously organized, and, you know, this compound of a museum and an art studio, and just very open and talking about my work, and having him, you know, going back to social proof, I believe in what I'm doing and I believe it's something special, but having him say he's never seen anything like it before, how amazing it is, how he could see so many of his artworks in a single snapshot like he usually can't, was really, really amazing. And I think that has helped me with certain opportunities of people who value him and his work and value what he says, and then they're kind of rubbing off on me a little bit. So very blessed to be in this position. I do think I've got something special here, and I'm just trying to figure out the right ways to like tinker and you know, backward forward to kind of get it in the right places at the right time.
Very, very cool. Very cool. And I know we've discussed kind of the process of how you find these super rare art books and all this, and being able to track it down and then taking your own kind of version to it and cutting it. It's very eye-opening and very impressive. So congratulations on your trajectory so far, and I look forward to seeing that Bitcoin magazine illuminated. Turning it over to TP, what are your thoughts on kind of the state of art on the blockchain, you know, whether it's looking at provenance or any of the other kind of key pieces that I think are really the core value that NFTs and the blockchain brings to artists and creators. How are you seeing kind of all of those benefits being kind of embraced by the traditional art world? Are you hearing from artists, you know, maybe former artists or artists that you had been connected to through your co-op or just in your communities? How do you think that kind of narrative is playing out in the broader art world?
Well, I love polarity in a conversation, so I'm going to add something other than manifest destiny. I'm going to say something that's completely the opposite of that and talk about diversity and inclusion. And, you know, even in the conversation you just were mentioning about being in physical places, a lot of northern communities are rural. They don't have the same access, the same economies as other communities. A lot of tech is entrenched in colonialism, the lingo, the idea of conquer, the idea of even the vernacular of slave versus, you know, hang on a second.
I think it's master.
Yeah, all of these, you know what I'm talking about. So for me, utilizing tech as long as I have, it's really challenging for me to, one, justify it. And I've used e-waste the entirety of my NFT experience. All the work that I do is on e-waste, things that I've taken from the garbage that were thrown out. And I work primarily with e-waste. And so I don't have the same access maybe that other people do. And I'm not sure that I want it. Like, if I've had people offer me in this community, you know, computers or Adobe products and things. And I'm like, I don't know that I want those. I like being who I am. I believe in being consistent and staying true to myself. So that means I don't have the same access as everybody else does, nor as somebody that's surviving a lot of colonial trauma. Like I said, the 60s scoop survivor. My twin sister's missing murder, Indigenous woman. She's on the list. And creating art as a second generation residential school survivor, and reclaiming my language, reclaiming my culture. I just don't have the same access points as other people do. And this isn't a sad story. This is just the truth. And it means for me, I don't have the same mental capacity to or desire to go to public places. I like staying in rural community. I find I'm overwhelmed. So emotional states are really important for a lot of creatives in this space, as well as language. So I think it's important to recognize that the art space in this way, Web3 has given a lot of opportunity for rural communities or neurodivergent artists and creatives to connect. And I think that's the major point for me was connecting with international community around the world where at the time when I came in, it was Asian hate that was going on. And I was connected with a lot of my friends and made a lot of connections and with friends in Korea. Matter of fact, they were the ones who called me Tipi. So I was NFTP and I was Clarina, but then they started calling me TP because it was harder to say Clarina. So I became TP pretty early on. So I think it's really important to recognize that not all of us have the same goals in this space. Not all of us have the same desires. And a lot of us are kind of pushing through some of the compassionate weight of being a social activist, and how do we find our way? How do we stay true to ourselves? So a lot of the artwork that I work with is, you know, dystopian. I call it my series TP5, which is dystopian science fiction. And it's through my lens of cultural healing. I talked about that a lot. I'm not going to get into that so much here. But I think it's when I look at tech and we think about what is our future. One of the things I was reading the other day, and they said, this is a culmination, this point I'm going to make, because I took a note on this. There was two different things that I was listening to in podcasts. One of them was whether AI was our future and what does our future look like. And they made a point that they said, for the first time in history, we don't know what our future looks like in 20 years. We don't know where we would normally have said plant crops to our children. We taught our children to do that, right? That this is from Western science. And I was like, that's really interesting. It was like the future of AI and what does our future look like? And I thought, that's really fascinating. And then I was listening to one podcast from somebody who was an Indigenous professor. And he's really talking about the future of tech and the idea of you mentioned gaming a little bit, but you talked about the idea of gaming where there's the four X's, which are explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. And that kind of ideology is the way that tech works. So a lot of the ideas of going in and conquering and building that way. So it's really, how do we do that? How do we tell our stories? How do we utilize all of that? How do we have conversations that are intellectual, provocative, and really kind of staying true to ourselves? So I think the space does do that. It gives it a lot of opportunities for us to do things that we haven't done before. And as far as the art world, I don't know. I mean, remember I just said I had the artist co-op and I couldn't, and it didn't succeed. Maybe it didn't succeed. It was a thread. It's a thread that I was pulling, and I brought it into Web3, and I want to take it back again. It's like, what could I do differently now? Because we've built that digital networking. We've built it. And so we had this opportunity that maybe outside of the IRL space and the physical space, we can make sure that networking is still happening, because these conversations can happen in a shop with a gallery like the one that I had, 7 years ago. So I think there's a lot of potential and the way that we're using multimedia in the space. And there is this one last thing before I don't want to ramble, but the opportunity to be an activist was really important to me. And I wanted to acknowledge that I had met with Patrick Amadon through a space that I was invited through community. And I wanted to say this because he and I and a number of other people were being censored. So some of the content I had created was being censored. I had been actually invited by a Canadian organization to a show, and then my work didn't show up. And so that's another conversation where our work is actually not showing up in places where they're utilizing our voices to say that they're representing us, or we're being represented, but we're not actually being shown. So I've seen that and heard that from a number of different people. So anyways, I met with Patrick Amadon. We did a space with a bunch of people. And then he brought me into curation with Click Create called Digital Disobedience. And I love that. So I created a piece about the Hudson Bay Company, and of course that really speaks to the tokenization. Again, when I was talking about colonial entrenched tech, think about tokenization and all that stuff and how that would interact with First Nation communities. I think it's wonderful. It's just so expansive to think about all the things that we can connect and expand our ideas and create art based on those ideologies and where we're growing. So I like the idea of being digital disobedient. And that being said, I'll conclude that the last piece I got was a digital disobedient piece on Arbitrum, was the first piece I just got yesterday. So I'm pretty excited that I'm doing my best to represent that diversity in a lot of the work that I'm doing cool. And connect with community. So yeah, I think there's still more to unpack in that, but I think I made my point.
I dig it. I know the last time you were on the show, you were mentioning your punk rock background as well. And so the digital disobedience, the activism, of course, speaking to the importance of Indigenous culture and some of the very unfortunate and sad history that we have in Canada, but being able to, I guess, in a healthy way, kind of showcase this and tell that story, and also have a platform for the art to kind of express that as well. To your point about the rural communities, right? And definitely, even for myself being up here in Canada, getting out to Miami, getting out to New York, it's not cheap, right? And it's definitely, an investment that I make for myself, for the podcast, for what I believe Web3 to be building and becoming, to make those connections. And the connections are priceless, but to your point, not accessible for everyone. Do you think that Web3, the blockchain, and specifically the metaverse, where we can now, jump into digital spaces and have pretty much all the same network ability. Of course, it's not ever quite the same as meeting IRL and speaking face to face, but it is still an ability to meet in the digital world and do still network, do still learn from other people. Do you think that the blockchain or the metaverse are helping with that accessibility problem? And do you see like things kind of moving in the right direction when it comes to creating a more accessible art space and the technology helping that become a reality?
Definitely. Definitely when I think about the way that so neurodivergent, I take everything, I absorb everything. And I've talked about the fact that when I'm having these conversations, you're in my living room. So how, you are here with me this year in my home, the kind of conversations that I feel are supportive, interactive, intelligent conversations. They make my life, right? I went to a really great conversation. I didn't realize they put one of my tipis that was collected for the Tezos permanent art collection by my son, Harriman. And it was in the background, and it was during NFT NYC, and I was listening to conversations there. So I was present. I think I was maybe only 2 people in the audience, but I actually wish that we were able to ask questions, because it was a live panel during NFT NYC. And, if there was more people that were showing up for those conversations, that's the kind of conversations I feel like I'm connected. And that's what being an empath is, right? Feeling neurodivergent, we connect differently. We're literally plugging in. And so I'm plugged in and I take things to heart. And I think it's really important. And especially when we think about music, when we talk about multimedia, we talk about film. We have the capability of watching a film together. And I think those spaces have yet to be built out. There was some building going on with the metaverse. And when he came into my space, I was hosting a couple of weeks ago, David, I was talking about the fact that, that's still happening. It's a good opportunity to scoop up some spaces and build. But definitely,
Sure.
we think about music. I'm a little disappointed when we talk about the legacy, or we talked about whether or not there is sovereignty, because there's been some, for instance, speaking of punk rock, NoFX dropped in 2021, which is a punk rock band that I saw when I was stomping around, causing trouble in my teens. And they dropped on Tezos, on Truzy. There was some music that was dropping. And I was like, what I really want, I missed it. And I was really disappointed, because it was just iconic for me to think that I would love to have that in my collection, especially with Tezos. And then Truzy just disappeared one day. I was like, this is a platform. It just disappeared. I'm like, who has these mints? They minted like 50 pieces of just for Tezos. And I'm like, they're gone.
Yeah.
And so the idea that this music that was created for a very specific time, and I talk about time in relation to blockchain. I utilize time, I mark time. I think we can use blockchain technology for news, for daily, like the on this date. I literally have a piece called On This Day, and it was when the Pope apologized to First Nations in Canada. It's literally on this date, and that's the name of the piece. So that time in history where NoFX dropped on Tezos created music for that time, that iconic time of 2021 is gone, and it was something important. And I don't think people understand that we're creating something here that is a legacy. And when these platforms close up shop, which you see happening, right? We see this happening. It's like, how is there another way that we could do something with that data? Because that data is somewhere.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it must be somewhere, right? Those NoFX tracks should be on chain, unless that platform didn't actually put them on Tezos, but they should be somewhere still.
No, I did a search. This is my nerd factor. I did a search on Twitter a couple of times, but last night I was poking around on it because I really wanted it. Sorry to nerd out here. And I was like, who has one? And I found one guy who says he has it in his wallet. I'm going to totally message him and go, I want to know if you downloaded it, because some people move stuff around right from wallet to wallet. So I'm like, if it's not on the platform though, it's like, how do we get that back? And I don't know, but
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Is it really there? Are we really building something, or is it disposable? Is it disposable data? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves, but I'm a bit nerdy. Okay.
I hear you, and it shouldn't be disposable. The whole goal of NFTs is to be immutable, and to your point, if you transfer it, because a lot of marketing or marketplaces use what they call a custodial wallet, right? So they actually have your NFTs in their wallet. It's not in your own sovereign wallet. So if their marketplace goes belly up while it's in their wallet, then you're kind of SOL. But if you make sure you transfer it to your own sovereign wallet, then you should be good. But definitely a lot to consider there. So changing subject just a little bit, I want to hear some inspiring stories. I think you've both kind of shared a little bit of what's brought you to the blockchain and some cool anecdotes from your experiences so far. But if you had to put a pinpoint on it, we'll start with you, Marco. What would you say is kind of the most inspiring experience that you've had on the blockchain with NFTs so far?
Wow. I mean, I feel like I probably shared most of the, I think being able to connect with people in person and have an hour of his time one-on-one was just remarkable. Before I was really in the thick of the crypto world, I'd heard of, people selling for 69 million and all the rumors and all the people who were jealous saying all these different things about it. And I was like, did the person get a house with that? Was there a crazy, was there something else that came? And it was just so easy to fall into all these traps. And then when I read his book, I'm just like, he has the ability to create across so many different genres. And he's just been able to stay so dedicated to his craft. It was so admirable. It's like, it wasn't until I did this deep dive in reading this book and understanding my respect for him grew and grew. And it rubbed off on me. Ever since meeting him, I've created an everyday, over 120 designs now. Not that that's kind of my I usually photograph the books and I create with it, but just to expand my creative horizons and to have ideas and turn them into digital designs every day is a beautiful chore that I like to improve upon. But really connecting with him was amazing. I mean, I did get to go to the Christie's Art and Tech Summit and see a lot of the giants in person. Got to talk to Snowfro, got to talk to Sprat, met with Redbeard and just a lot of guys I really respect in the space. And I think there is beauty in being first and being new, but I think there once that happens, you have to kind of keep going. I feel like there's almost, some people say maybe there's like a Mount Rushmore of creators, and because they were first, because they're the first person who did this, and I benefit a little bit with that and what I'm trying to do with these illuminated books, but it's really a space that kind of opens it up to everyone. So my best moments have been many of them.
That's awesome. But it's that human connection, right?
Yeah, I mean, meeting you, I met you on one of the big highest days of my life. After I had sold the first piece of the Signature Series for more than I had made my first year out of college yearly salary. It was just like a totally eye-opening experience of creative future. And I like to say this point a lot, but I talk about just thankfulness for the people who believe in me, because it's not just saying that they want to have an awesome piece of artwork or that they want to have this mural in their home community, but it's them saying they want you to keep creating. It's a vote of confidence that they want you to do what you do and do more of it. And so every sale, big or small, every support really helps me do that. And it's a great way to interact. Like I know every single person who has purchased from me. I have a relationship with them, and I haven't had any of these like crazy huge collections, and it's just like for small amounts, and I really like that, because I do feel the connection of that makes the story richer, makes the moment richer, makes the relationship richer. And so there's definitely been a lot of ups and downs, but I feel very fortunate to have had some really career monumental moments connecting with people in the Web3 world.
Very cool, very cool. And I do love how your concept has like started in the physical and then kind of bled into the digital, into the blockchain, and just the way that that is now kind of snowballed into everything you just described is really cool and inspiring. And definitely glad I met you back in Miami, and it's really cool to be able to follow your trajectory. TP, same question to you. Any inspiring story or anything that really jumps out at you as far as an experience that you've had in Web3 that really just kind of helped you be like, yeah, this is where I want to be and this is where I want to keep building? Anything you want to share about inspiring experiences with that NFTs?
Well, first off, I wanted to acknowledge what Marco said there. I think that was really beautiful. The idea that we're being encouraged, I think, is the biggest thing for a lot of creatives. It's validating. There's a lot. It's multi-directional. There's so much happening in the space. Sometimes I feel like it's a bit challenging to feel like there's the vernacular of FOMO and all that idea. And so, I think my biggest experience in Web3 for me has been just the smaller connections with people, the networking. It's a very validating experience to feel like you're seen, to be included in conversations like this one, to meet new people. And it's hard as a creative because, I mean, a lot of us, there's like the very first experiences with being a creative for me, I found it really hard. For instance, when I was younger, my dad wanted to pay, my dad wanted to pay for all my art supplies, and he wanted to do a percentage. He wanted to be in charge of selling stuff, and I just couldn't do it. I was really embarrassed by the idea, and quite often in spaces, even in Clubhouse, people would say, "Let's talk about what you're doing," and then I would get really overwhelmed and I'd feel close to tears. It's just too much. It's like it's an emotional experience. You talk about the dailies. I create a lot of art. And it's just like this is a TP5 for today. It was kind of creating a mood. And it's always mixed, right? It's just different ideas and different things. So the idea that people will connect with some of that, or you can tell stories with your artwork and people will relate to that. It's very interesting experience to me. Again, and you're familiar with this, David, but maybe Marco or some of your other listeners might not be, but some of our teachings for us up here, our Midday Wind teachings, is one of our first lessons aside from community is humility. And it's where you advocate for others, not yourself. And so that's really hard. So I often overthink. I'm over emotional about how I post things. I don't know if I'm supposed to tag people. I don't know what the rituals of social medias are. Before I came into Web3, I had a following of, and I still have my personal account is 50 followers on Instagram. And that's it. And now I have like 15K on Twitter. And I'm like, what on earth is going on over here? So the idea that we're making relatable content and connecting and advocating for others is what was really important about Web3. So being able to try to stay consistent with my own teachings of humility and making sure that we are, advocating for others as much as we advocate for ourselves and finding our place in that has really been the most beautiful part. Yeah. And feeling like, okay, I have something to say. It's taken me most of my life to be able to create art and feel okay about sharing it. And so that's taken quite a long time. That's a long time because I hid behind the clients, right? It's like, I'll make this for you. I get paid for this. This is how much it is. And it's a really strange translation when we think, if I was paid, this is how much I would charge to do this. Am I making the same amount when I work in Web3 or minting things and things like that? I'm like, I got paid more to work for a client and just paint or give them what they want, a digital piece that they want, than I do for my own. So, there's been some validating experiences as a creative in the space, but also as a builder and understanding, what is my voice? And if I have to say it sometimes, is there a price for that, a concession that I'm willing to make? And for me, quite often I'm not. So when people let me be my, social justice advocate, let me be a disobedient
Right.
Let me be punk rock. I'm going to do it.
So,
And that's the space because we were built this tech. So behind the art, the tech is a bunch of, people that were nerdy like me. And that's me. That's the nerd that was, trying to figure out how to make a website from a book with, a string of letters.
right.
I succeeded.
So
So,
kind of
yeah.
finding your tribe, essentially, you would say, is kind of the most inspiring thing, and finding people who encourage you to kind of live out your artistic self in the open.
I never lost my tribe.
True. Sorry. Yeah. Bad language. But finding a global community that encourages you is maybe a better way to put it.
That's
I
beautiful.
built it because my 3 teepees, my branding is you, me, and we. So
Right.
and teepee in Cree means equal. So we're all equal. I'm teepee and you are teepee. So I had to build that. I kind of built a brand around the message that I'm trying to convey.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
That message really resonates with what I do with the students. And then I really want to build off TP's point because I feel like when I go into these schools, I ask them a question and I take all their words and I create this collaborative mural with them where I show them how to use spray paints and we paint their words in their space in a fun and colorful and uplifting way. And it just makes them feel so seen and heard. And I really love what you said in terms of letting them live their most authentic artistic life. And it's not just, I find it important to do that for kids because sometimes they don't see that as an option just to show them the importance of that. But even as adults, for the full spectrum, I mean, just allowing, supporting how we can, but showing people that it's okay to be them as they are in their creative, in their most creative way, I think is such a beautiful gift to be there for someone in that way. So I wanted to second that and say how important that is to me as well.
1000%. Amazing. That's great, inspiring tidbits there. Thank you both. I am curious now. Tipi mentioned being multi-chain from day one, essentially. I think she started on Wax, which I've never even made an NFT on Wax. I think I collected 1 or 2 back in the day, but I'm not very familiar with it. Marco, you're only minting on Ethereum right now, right? Have you had thoughts towards another blockchain? Have you looked at kind of the markets, whether Solana, Tezos, have you looked at any other blockchains? Are you interested in that? Or do you find that you're kind of finding success in Ethereum and you're just going to kind of hunker down and keep plugging away?
I think all artists should be open to all opportunities, and this Sotheby's piece will be my first ordinal.
Oh, right,
So
right.
I think that is, a nice branching out of sorts. I don't have any allegiance to any chain, although, Ethereum has been the first one I did and had some success with. So I think they all come with their benefits and their detriments, and it's kind of should be open just in terms of what TP was talking about earlier. Like you want to have all these creative processes in your tool belt, so you never know when you're going to have them. Same thing with the chains. Like you want to be able to understand them and use them, so when something comes up and that you're aware of it. I think that's a big part of the Web3 community, is just understanding similar ideas in different ways, like how it's translated differently.
Cool. And when you look at that Sotheby's and the ordinals piece, was there an educational aspect to that? Or was it like, hey, you've probably heard of ordinals, we're going to be doing something, we'd really love to have your art. Like how into, like, did they try to tell you about it, or were you already very familiar with kind of what ordinal's doing as far as inscribing art onto the blockchain? I'm actually curious about how they're going to manage to do that, because I think your pieces are a little bit heavier, right? And the ordinals do have limitations sometimes on the file size. So I'm just curious how much education there was when they told you, or when they asked you to submit art for that.
I feel like I had the best masterclass in live painting at the first Ordinals conference at Art Basel last year, because I literally was painting for 6 to 7 hours, listening to all the speakers, asking people what Ordinals meant, had all these conversations with everyone there, and I was just like absorbing all the information, and that really kind of resonated in such a beautiful way. To your point, yes, it is a little tricky in terms of file size, because I am starting with photos and want to have the crisp ideas, especially for some of the smaller text that I want to be legible from the magazine. I am currently working with their team in terms of being able to translate certain ideas, and there are really some awesome websites out there. One is, I think it's actually called, Squoosh, the Squoosh app. lets you like kind of play very, very easily with the size and the resolution, number of colors, and the quality. And I highly recommend that. I just started working with that. But the one thing I really pride myself on is that every single NFT I've sold so far, I learned the technology. I pushed myself to learn the animation, the style, and I created all of it. With the ordinals, there are a few, it seems like, kind of computational layers that you can add on at very, very small file sizes that can add to some of the animation or some of the style. And so right now, that is the beautiful growing pain that I don't have the luxury of too much time with. Because
I was going to say, that sounds like some serious tech. You have to, a little bit of, I don't know.
Yes, learning curve and not a lot of time, but luckily the Canva team has been really helpful in terms of sending me links and understanding a few things and having me work with their dev team. But I will definitely keep you posted on it. But
I look forward to seeing it, and I'm wondering if they're going to have one like high res version they show like on a site, and then the actual ordinal maybe is a slightly scaled down version. I don't know, but I'm curious to see how that goes. And very cool.
Definitely have a landing page to that point. I mean, I had a film crew here filming the process of just like how it came together, because usually, like I said, this takes about 2 months. I had finished it on a strict deadline, so I was able to do like a very nice time lapse and kind of getting the process and talking about it a little bit. So it is going to be a landing page with all the information, but the actual ordinal will not be the same.
Maybe slightly different. Yeah. Very cool. No, I love it. That's awesome. So cool. Ordinals is one. So Tipi, having opened your 14th crypto wallet across different blockchains, I'm curious if you would agree. It sounds like Marco's saying kind of it's a tool, right? A toolkit, and understanding, different blockchains as different tools maybe. But also, can all the chains win? Because back to our earlier point, about immutability, right? And you just mentioned a marketplace that just disappeared. So if anyone had their NFTs stuck in their custodial wallet, those probably disappeared too, unfortunately, right? So when looking at the blockchains overall, maybe it's a wax, maybe, a lot of people seem to think Tezos is definitely not going anywhere, but that would be heartbreaking, right? If Tezos somehow, had a critical failure and just went under and I lost all my beautiful art on Tezos. So I'm just curious, do you think that all chains can or will win, or are you concerned about being spread across different blockchains like that? Just any thoughts around, the importance of being multi-chain and how you're kind of navigating that, Tipi?
Well, first off, I want to acknowledge Marco again, because he said something and I was like, I think a lot of people forget that we have our own artwork. And so that quality, every single piece that I've ever created, sometimes we're limited to, for instance, we'll say 50 megabytes. And you're like, that is terrible when you work with MP4s. I can't do anything with that. Or they'll say you have to submit a GIF. And I'm like, I can't even present that on social media properly. So quite often, what we do and how we do it is a misrepresentation of the final the file handling, right? So working with files, you can definitely work that into the inscription. Is like, this is not the final, this is a capture of what it is. So I mean, I think that's it, and that's kind of my segue to what kind of responsibility do we have with our artwork? It's me, it's my artwork. Anybody, I feel 100% confident I can recreate anything that I've ever minted. And I have my own catalog of information. I have my own data. It's my own data after all. It's all mine. So whatever chain it's on, if you're having really good conversations with collectors and community, you can say, you just reach out to me and I have everything. You should have a list of your collectors. You should know where things are going. I think that's a kind of accountability we have ourselves, and kind of whether or not we're it's our measure of progress, I think, right? So I have no fear about that. As far as multi-chain, to me, it's a lived experience. I'm living life right now. Every time I try something new, it's a new community, it's a new interaction, it's new introductions, it's reconnections, it's high fives, and it's a lived experience. And I think you can't take away from that whether or not something disappears or not. It's my experience. So my quality of life is these connections, as I mentioned before. And I think that'll continue to grow. For me, one of the biggest things is really unraveling, and I'm kind of sleuthy with tech. I really want I want to do that. I want to figure it out. Like even with Patrick's latest drop, which was his piece, the disobedience was on 4 chains through Transient Labs. And it was ETH. was it 4 chains? Sol, Base, and Arbitrum. And so when you went to his site, it just said it was basically a C drive, and you couldn't figure out what the heck. And I literally got out of bed. I was like, how the heck do I solve this problem? Because I was like, you have to input something there to be able to see it. And I wanted to solve the problem. And I got up and I was like looking at his Twitter profile. I was looking at his website. I was like, why did he change his website? What's going on with his website? And then I was trying to figure out where if he mint, who did he mint with? And it was with Transient Labs. And I figured out there was the tokens, there was the contracts. And then I figured out it was the contracts. So I took a chance and I went to the Etherscan and I copied the contract address and I inserted it. I was like, success! I was so pleased with my. It was like 2 a.m. and my 14-year-old was like, what are you doing down there? Like, I'm nerding out. I got to figure this out. So
well, he didn't make it easy for you, eh?
But I loved it. No. And so, I mean, other people probably, were able to talk to each other, but it was like, to me, that captures the lived experience, right? It's just like, I didn't need to talk to anybody. I get to tell the story afterwards about how that was for me. I really loved that. That was important. So my idea, like how I'm going to progress in the space, is really creating art, but also being expansive intellectually and through tech and evolve. I mean, that was the piece that I did with digital disobedience, was just my Tipi evolving. And really that idea that our knowledge evolves and nothing is static like that. And so that's really important to me. I want to create maybe some connections from some of the northern communities with some of our tech industry and build a bit more. So that's actually something I'm working on this week. This is why I was looking at kind of like the idea of some people are really concerned about data sovereignty for Indigenous knowledge. And I'm like, why wouldn't we create partnerships where you're utilizing that in a meaningful way and change and maybe having an interchange between access for northern communities while we create partnerships. So that's kind of something that I'm looking at. At the same time, it's like, as a visual person, we can tell those stories of what that looks like, right? So I think, yeah, I like the idea, all of it. It's just powerful to me.
I love it. And
a multi-changeable way. The more ways that we do that, the more stories we have to tell.
I dig it. Blockchain agnostic has been the way I look at it. I'm open to anything. I've definitely got the lion's share of my NFTs across Ethereum, Solana, and Tezos for sure. But a few of the layer 2s as well, especially Base lately. A lot of people have been dropping really cool artwork on Base. And yeah, shout out to Patrick Amadon. That's really cool. You were able to grab a nice Arbitrum NFT, the digital disobedience. I love it. I dig it. So I wanted to get a thought from both of you. When looking at the traditional world, so Marco, you were talking about, now you've got an ordinals project with Sotheby's, which is fascinating. I'm even curious about how Sotheby's decided to jump into ordinals. Is this their first one? I don't know. You'll have to let me know. But Sotheby's did that. You also met Beeple at a Christie's event, right? So you've got these big kind of auction houses that are obviously kind of jumped in with both feet. I think from the initial excitement back in 2021, they were pretty early to kind of see what was happening and try to jump in. I have one of my favorite POAPs that I have is actually a Reasonable Doubt. Jay-Z's album Reasonable Doubt had celebrated their 25th anniversary, and they actually did a little thing with Christie's auction house in Decentraland where you just had to go see this really cool 3D space that they had built that had all these pictures and audio from Reasonable Doubt and Jay-Z and kind of his story over 25 years. And so you claim the POAP, and now I've got that timestamp of that anniversary of the 25th anniversary of Reasonable Doubt. And so that's just one example of that I thought was actually pretty cool, and it came through Christie's, which is kind of more traditional auction house. So my question for you, Marco, and for TP after is, do you think that the traditional art space, the traditional art industry is ultimately helping or hindering Web3 adoption right now?
I think in the beginning, when anything is new, there's a lot of judgment, whether it's good or bad, accepted or not accepted. And then I think as communities build, as transactions happen, people in power at places like the ones you mentioned realize there's something here. And if they're smart, they say, we can make money off of this. As long as people are buying it, we'll go for it. And so I think there is a way that they are adapting. I do think that the old version of the gallery taking 50% model is going to die out, and they're going to have to change their ways. I know rents are expensive. I know that they bring their collectors, but in a world where I could be on social media and sell my pieces, to collectors who reach out directly and are seeing things, I wonder where that takes a place. Where just in like the artist development is 50% to me seems like so much. And when I met you, I was connecting with a few different galleries, and I'm still on this fence. It just seems like, given that I have to spend very often a lot on these signed books and the nice frames, like there's a specific investment I put in to then see that. But if they're bringing the buyers and they're doing their thing, I feel like that's a different story. Specifically to your question, I feel there just has to be an openness to adapt in life, in relationships, in art. I think that that's where the most successful aspects come about. And I think galleries are like, we're never going to have screens, are starting to put up screens, and galleries that are saying we never want to sell this stuff and seeing how well it sells are starting to sell it. And so I think that the people have more power than maybe we think, but just when we vote with our interests, when we vote with our money, we are showing what we like and what we are doing. And I think people will kind of back end into that. I saw an interesting argument this morning on X about, a lot of the traditional art world kind of thinking they're too highbrow for like the degen culture and like saying they want to be in the world, but not really being in the world. And I think that is an issue. I think being able to fully immerse yourself in something to be, what is authentic in it, I don't know, but being your most authentic self, I know we talked a lot about that. I think there just has to be an acceptance that this is weird and different. We're all trying new things here together, and we're going to see what happens.
Cool. So overall, there's a hesitance, but things are moving in the right direction, I guess is what you'd say. Tipi, how do you feel about this? Is traditional art industry helping or hindering, or how do you feel about kind of its place in blockchain and Web3?
I always go right away to futurism, and I think about digital screens that are prevalent in all of our spaces in real life. And I think we're moving, especially with the kind of I wouldn't say magic, but the preoccupation with technology right now, with AI, with what we're doing, with space, with travel. I think that there is this more openness. There's a pathway that's been opened up for our digital art to be an experience for others, to connect. There is more recognition of maybe moving from art spaces, moving from ad spaces to art spaces. And I think that's just a reality that's going to happen. Whether or not, I see that. Would you rather walk through an urban center and see art, or would you rather see, a Benetton ad or whatever the heck is? I don't know what maybe I'm showing my age. Is Benetton even still around?
Yeah, they're still around.
Anyways, but yeah, I think that's the experience. And the other aspect of that is the whole avenue of social media, people trying to figure out the value of, making something like you can pay for a subscription for an app, or you can create content for yourself, right? So this the whole content creator marketing aspect of your own work. And I think Marco was just talking a little bit about that. Like if we're paying traditional art spaces, we're seeing at this point, and I've noticed this a lot in the last year and a half, a lot of boutique galleries now where people are setting up digital spaces, and pretty much you can rent a space and get some screens and plop them up, and all of a sudden you're a gallery, right? So that's happening. I'll take advantage of that if I can do it. But what is the goal of that? A lot of the artists right now, it goes back to, isn't it funny? It goes full circle back to the point I made about some of the artists not being shown where they thought they were being shown, and whether or not the artists are fully supported in a proper way. Like if I'm your advocate in social media, Are you giving me content that's usable content for my portfolio? And if you're going to validate that as a justifiable medium, then you actually have to add the professionalism to it. And I think there's some things. There's a lot of learning still with the space and the way that artists are treated, and by those that are marketing, spaces where they're featuring artists. I think they can do better. And so once those are checked off, I think we'll be able to we'll be able to have a bit of longevity. But yeah, right now it's just still a bit topical.
Would you say that the traditional art spaces, the galleries, are still basically catching up, kind of thing, and just reluctant to embrace, like Marco's saying, whether it's screens, whether it's the actual token? Do you think it's just a matter of basically catching up, or does it have to be like a real cultural change, TP?
Oh, I just think we're building it, right? So we're having these conversations, and if we're having them not a versus way, again, as allyship. And I think that's the way that I work in the world. That's truly how I see a lot of things. And so when we have conversations that are like, it's not combative to say, I would, if you're going to include me and my following in an advocacy for your event, I would like professional photography done. I would like you to find somebody that would volunteer, and they have that reciprocating social media content themselves to say, I was a photographer that did all this stuff, right? There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of professional marketers in Web3, photographers, event planners. I was logistics for a film festival here. I know how to handle events. There's just some things that need to be done. And I think there needs to be definitely a bit more I can't say that word, professionalism in event planning, so that we really feel that we have a solid foundation for us to say this is our artwork, and let's make room for it. And then once they're executed in a very beautiful way, where we have our portfolios that demonstrate these digital spaces, that's the advocacy that's going to change some of the way that regular screens and in public places will handle our artwork.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we're both fans of Tezos, right? So Tezos got a lot of heat after the last Miami Art Basel because of the way that they kind of threw up screens on this big central pole, and they had kind of the cords from the screens hanging down. It wasn't quite, well managed, and so they called it the Tez pole, and the whole Tezos community started making these memes about the Tez pole, and they were just really ripping it up. But at the same time, Tezos was just trying to promote some of the art on their blockchain, trying to have an event at the Art Basel, and to your point, maybe hadn't really fully thought about how to most professionally handle this art and curate this art and display this art, because it's almost an afterthought, like, oh, we just have to make sure we get the art submitted, and then we'll just make sure it goes up on screens, it'll be fine. And to your point, I think there's not enough of that really thorough kind of like professional handling of the art. And frankly, I've been guilty of this as well, trying to put on satellite events through a couple DAOs that I work with, and it's can easily become an afterthought, because getting the art is the hard part in your mind, but the reality is the actual hard part is displaying it in a nice way, and then, like you said, actually capturing the content and getting photos of it and pushing it out there, and that's the real value for the artist, right? So just great points all around there. And I don't know, like, what do you think about that as far as being an afterthought?
The Tez pole. Okay, so you got to picture how perfect that was for me. It's actually, they had my one of my teepees up, and it was a photograph of a teepee in the forest in the north here. And it was the one that was for the Tezos permanent collection. And then it's on this chicken wire and it was just, and there was cords hanging down. It was like this weird, and I was like, it would only even be better if the light was flickering in the background, like furthering my dystopian polarity that I love in my artwork anyways. I'm like, that was just actually kind of iconic and perfect. So I don't know, it's like having a sense of humor as well. We're evolving, like we're building something, and you can't take life so gosh darn seriously. Like that was hilarious, and I loved it. And they did a turnaround on that. Like, I think, to Marco's point about the degen idea and those things, there is that. And there's part of us that is that. as well. It's not, we're not immersed in that. Some of us creators aren't totally immersed in the degen culture, but that is the foundation of kind of what we're working with. And so as long as it's true to experience this building in different communities as well. And so it's like, as long as people can be a little bit, have a sense of humor, have a little bit of bounce with some of it, but still have like professional expectations. I think that, it should be a fun creative space. We're supposed to be evolving, and it is with technology after all.
100%.
So the lights can go off.
I love it. Marco, did you want to jump in there?
There are a lot of things that TP said that resonated with me, and I think overall, just personally, I think Tezos is winning because we're talking about them there, and they're selling more meme pieces on their website. So like, even however that happened, whether it was the event team that messed up or I like the idea of taking it less seriously. Her earlier point though about just respect in the space, I think is really important as the galleries and museums kind of turn in our favor. I think getting rid of elitism, I think, is a kind of it's just like such a core property, it seems like, to the crypto world that I feel like is still prevalent in a lot of the high-end art worlds. And I think how like that mixed is like, that's like the opposite of degen culture in some ways, and kind of how they smash together in the middle is kind of this beautiful hilarity. But I think art is for everyone. I think creativity is for everyone. I think Web3 is for everyone. And so the way that we work together, the way that we learn from each other will be even more important moving forward.
Awesome. Curious about like looking at the markets, right? And there's a lot of people, I think TP and I talked to a lot of artists in the space, and there were some who straight up threw their hands up and said, I'm kind of over this, feeling like they're kind of begging, or feeling like, the FOMO is all focused on another corner of the crypto space, and that artists are having, getting a raw deal kind of thing. Do you think that the artist industry or the art industry on the blockchain is going to mirror crypto, or does it mirror crypto as far as the bulls and the bear runs, right? And kind of going up and down. You've sold art, I think, throughout the bear. I know TP sold some NFTs throughout the bear. And so I guess I was just curious, because you hear a lot of people saying, oh, NFTs are going to come back, it'll be, fine. But I'm curious, I don't know whether the crypto hitting, its new bull market, whenever, some people say we're in it right now, but as it continues to maybe swing in that direction, I don't know whether that's going to trickle down to NFTs that were popular 3 years ago, regaining popularity at the same time. So I'm just curious about both your thoughts. Maybe Marco, I'll turn to you first, and then love to hear TP's thoughts on kind of the market, and whether you think that the whole crypto bull and bear market actually is relevant to artists minting their work on the blockchain, outside of the cost of the crypto, of course, then that's relevant. But when it comes to actually making sales and finding success in the space, do you think that, a crypto bull run, you should try to time your entry into the market kind of thing? Or is it just kind of like, do it for the art, you'll find your collectors, your supporters? What do you think, Marco?
That was one of my toughest learning curves, I think, initially, trying to understand the idea that people are more likely to spend in bull market, and just depending on the price of certain assets, they're more likely to spend. That just kind of seemed like a foreign concept to me, coming from the traditional art world. Yes, the economy goes up and down, but your buyers are kind of the buyers, and they're kind of buying and spending. And I noticed, given the different market conditions in the crypto space, people become more or less likely. They're waiting for their assets to gain more in value than they would have, more to spend, or they didn't want to get rid of them at certain times. And that's kind of a strange way to think about just transaction. But I think as a creative, you can't be trying to perfectly time how something comes out and when it comes out. Yes, you might be able to hold it and stuff, but I feel like as creators, it's just like, there's so much in me that I want to share, I want to create, and I can't wait for the right market conditions. I'm going to come out and try to do my best and find my people, my tribe, who are going to respect that. And you just don't want to hinder yourself. You don't, I feel like as creators, we want as much freedom as we can to create what we want, when we want, whenever we want, and putting the pricing conditions and the economic conditions, altogether kind of constrain that creative process and how you want to be your truest self. So I think you can't let it stifle you in any way.
Yeah, so even if it does impact, don't let it kind of be your defining factor of how you time your art kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I got pushed back initially with some of my pricing for my signature series launch, and then I sold the first one within 1 hour VIP opening, and it was like a vote of confidence. I do believe that you're going to find people, it's going to be harder to find more expensive sales than it is to find less expensive sales. But as you build a track record, as you build a product that you appreciate and a brand, I think people are going to love you no matter when the market is, no matter what the market is doing at that time.
Amazing. TP, same question to you. How do you feel about kind of whether it's timing the market or just anticipating the market? Do you think that art on the blockchain is impacted by the crypto bull and bear runs, and how should artists navigate that, if at all?
Oh, this is a good one. I'm going to share a story. And it's when I first came in 2021, of course, that was the beginning of the year. And it was really, that was full. It was full on, let's go.
Yeah.
And so I was meeting a lot of different people. And I met somebody, his name is John Parks, concept artist, incredible artist. And so one of his experience was he was selling works on Ethereum. I think he had started in 2020. And so he had a big, strong collector base. And he was really selling works for like, it was just crazy amount of ETH, like 10 ETH was his floor, 15 ETH was his floor. And then he was minting in that time, and eventually he was getting messages from his collectors that were saying he was minting, so he would lower the price because it wasn't collected right away. It was kind of like, I have it to go. I don't want to speak his story, but this is what he told me in a space where I was featuring concept artists, and he was one of them. Cool. And he was saying that because his floor was dropping, his collectors were getting upset with him. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up spending 30 ETH to buy back pieces so that he could raise his floor back up, which is insane. And only in a bull market could you do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Marco,
wild.
you want to say something about that before?
No, that's wild. I mean, that shows a certain appreciation for your collectors, but that's really going above and beyond. I don't know if everyone would do that.
Exactly. So the idea that and that makes my point. Exactly. So that was during the bull. So since then, he created a series called Angry Ape Army, which came out on OpenSea, and he was going to have a game and everything like that. So as a concept artist, he had it. It's still out there. Because I connect with him, I was on the list to collect early, and I ended up getting some pieces, and I sold all of them actually, and I think the highest one I got was 4 ETH for one.
Yeah, there you
Which is
go.
pretty sweet. But I have to say, and we talk about the conversations of art, market, and tech, because AI came into the picture, there was a lot of film industry and concept artists that were anti-AI. And so a lot of artists, and I do air quotes with that when we talk about elitism or being positional in our ideologies, that he stepped back a lot and he put out anti-AI. There was a meme that was going around saying anti-AI, and then people disappeared from that. And it's not. I'm just telling the story. I'm not saying whether or not it's bad or good. But as far as the market, what happened to all those holders of those apes? What happened to all that artwork? What happened to the future? Is that a rug? Do you air quote again? That's still there. It's kind of like the idea of what do we owe our communities, and what do we owe when we build that? We sell that work, and we're professionals. He's a professional artist, a concept artist. So the idea that we have works in this, and we're fluctuating whether or not we're going to build, we're going to sell, we're going to, would he have been better to, this is just a question, would he have been better to just stay the artist, right? And so sometimes I think that's that kind of, I'm really interested in seeing how we could, I'm saying this generally, how we could build further. How can my art, tell a bigger story? And so the markets will impact that for sure, because I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it and I have
100%.
questions about it,
And
right? So it's like, now is not the time to do it, or it is. And what
right.
happens? What are you getting from it? Is it a social media presence? Is it a political position, an allyship that you want to promote? So there's always some metric for why somebody's choosing that, right? They're trying to make some statement. So he was, I believe, an advocate, and maybe still is. So I can't speak for him, for blockchain technology, and was building on it. But the technology kind of went in a different direction, and that's kind of what tech does, right? It
Yeah.
goes and do we stay when it goes in that different direction?
And then for him to kind of, I'm not saying he did this, but if, maybe AI just turned him off and he throws his arms up and just kind of walks away from everything, to your point, that PFP project, which definitely when I look at the PFPs, those will, I think, mirror the crypto bull and bear a little bit more, because you're going to have, as we've mentioned, kind of the degen activity around the PFPs a lot more, people wanting to flip it, and congratulations to you being able to sell a 4 ETH PFP. That's pretty amazing. But to your point, would that be considered a rug pull now because that creator kind of walked away from it? A lot of investors would say yes. And to your other question, would he have been better off plugging away and sticking to kind of art for art's sake and not trying to make like a bigger, broader PFP collection? Now, financially, my guess is he probably made pretty well on the PFP collection, so maybe he wouldn't be better off. But now if he's gonna, on the flip side, be the subject of criticism, people calling him a rug puller, who knows what other problems that might lead to, maybe it wasn't worth it. But that was a really great kind of case in point to the question about the markets and kind of how the NFT industry, and specifically art NFTs, may be a little bit more immune, I would say, to the ups and downs of the market, as opposed to, like you said, the PFP collections and some of the more kind of degen meme collections and things like that. But great point and great example.
Well, here's the question: Does the tech eat the artist? That's what I wonder. Because if the bigger you get, the more people, the more input, the further away of control you have on what you're saying and how you're doing it, right? So there was a lot of people that came into that project. He was working with a team. The more voices, the more diluted you are. And so that's something I think that, we have to consider as creatives in the space as well. That's the nature of tech and art. It's completely, we're trying to build a symbiotic relationship with, well, I'm not quite sure if many can walk that path.
100%. Marco, did you want to chime in on that at all?
I just hate the idea of letting external factors determine how and when you'll be creative. I just feel like, to me, creative freedom is the greatest gift, to explore what you have to share and thinking about how market conditions affect that. I think the fear in that is, right, you don't want something that no one appreciates or buys, but you also don't want to stymie your own creative process. So I think there's a right time for everything, and sometimes we're early, sometimes we're late, and sometimes we're right on time. And I guess it's kind of trying to figure out the proper balance between all of that.
1,000%. I love that. That was a great summation. I know we're hitting the 90-minute mark here, so I want to respect everyone's time. I appreciate you. It's been a really, really amazing conversation. As we're winding down here, I wanted to get your thoughts specifically. What is kind of something that you think is the biggest selling point of NFTs? Now, Marco, you've mentioned provenance. Tipi has mentioned community and being able to really, reach this new global community and build a new global community and get encouragement and also give encouragement. So the collaboration, essentially. But when maybe you're trying to sell it, or maybe sell's not the right word, but encourage friends, artists who you think would find success or at least find value in the NFT space. What's kind of the main selling point that you would use to kind of encourage others to jump into NFTs? Maybe Marco, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, my biggest aspect is the provenance, but I don't think that's the biggest selling point to other people. I think the way I've seen it is that it's an add-on for the typical trad art buyer, that you can have a physical piece of mine and then for the same price get a complimentary NFT. So really, I'm trying to make it as win-win for them as possible, to help them see the value and bring them into the conversation. I think that as more and more people do that, it'll just kind of have a bigger and brighter, more educated market. But there's pushback. There have been some pieces I've created when I've I had a piece that I showcased at the carousel in the Louvre last year, and I sold it for crypto, but the buyer just didn't necessarily want to purchase the digital component to it. So I think there are people who will want it for their own specific reasons. I think that's part of the beauty of the art world, is that there's a range of buyers and interests, and just have to be kind of open to what the possibilities are. I'm a proponent of it. I think I see the value in it, and I think without being preachy and without being annoying, sharing that with some people will get it, some people won't, and we'll have to live with that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's interesting. So you had someone who bought the physical piece with crypto, but then didn't want the NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of came up. It was like they saw it on the spot, they wanted that, and just kind of it was a very, very beautiful and interesting transaction. But
Cool.
that's just one single example. I've had people who, like, I was going to make an NFT piece of, like, no, I just want to buy the physical piece and hang it on my wall. And not everyone sees the value in it. That not everyone has a screen. Not everyone has the crypto, and that's just different segments of one huge and diverse art market.
I dig it. That's what we're here for. I love it. Tipi, same question to you. What do you think is kind of the biggest thing that's attractive about NFTs, and what would you be telling artist friends and others when encouraging them to check out NFTs or consider minting NFTs?
Well, very, very simply, everybody is digital. You'd have to be a pretty serious Luddite to not have any way of having a screen or looking at a screen. Even that person at some point that Marco was saying had seen that piece would be wanting to show somebody the piece that they collected, or they would take a picture of it in their house. And it's digital. It's digitized at that point. So why wouldn't you want the provenance to say this is the quality of the digital experience, and you can have this quality of digital experience. This is my, I'm the artist behind it. What the final output is my decision. So I think the reality, for me, just to convey to people that we are already digital. And again, I think people forget that we have ads, we watch televisions, we watch films, we listen to music. It's all digitized. There's a great show on the Spotify in Sweden, and how they evolved there. It was a really interesting storyline on Netflix I just watched. It was really cool. But the idea that it's a huge leap, I think people get lost in the currencies and the translations, when in fact, if we just start with the very simple fact that we are digital, we're looking at digital screens all day long, and they exist, and they have for 25, 30 years that we've been doing, like I said, websites and stuff. We created the JPEG, and we've still done that. A lot of the stuff that is created for print on shirts, all the marketing, everything that we're doing is all digital, even the literature. So I would just remind people that digital is still here, is part of the future, and is part of our past. So it's not that much of a leap to really recognize. It's just how are you collecting that, or how are you storing that? So it's keeping the data is something that final output is the artist's right to share that in a way that represents them, and be able to say, that picture, all the information that's in that picture, I put it there. These are my words that go along with the story, rather than it just say JPEG 1030p. You get to say what it says behind that imprint. So I think it's an important thing to just stick to the facts. It's digital. It's been digital. It's still digital.
That's it. I like it. Keep it simple. The digital world is expanding. It's growing. It's now has real world value thanks to cryptocurrency and technology. And you have this ability now to really reach out and monetize your artwork in this digital space. So it's a good way of kind of breaking it down. Sticking with you, Tipi, what are you kind of most excited about, going through to 2024 into 2025, when you're looking at the evolution of blockchain and what you're working on? Anything you want to share with the audience as we wind down here, what you're most kind of excited about?
Well, I think I've conveyed pretty well. Probably a little bit too long about my passion for being a creative. No, it's just the connections for me are really important. And also, again, doing that legacy work where it's coming full circle, where I started in a physical, I started digital, physical, and trying to let people give more information. So in that art space that I had, that physical art space, I was trying to say you can connect. There's more work you can't see in a physical space. There's more history here. There's more story to tell. So when I had that website set up with each artist and their profile and links to their work, that was all digital. And if they had the opportunity for somebody to say, "Oh, I want this," you can collect that piece. I had people that were buying artworks that they came into the physical space. They drove all the way down from they were in the middle of the United States somewhere, and they came back like 6 months later. So the expectation that we have to sell things immediately it's kind of a false market. Sometimes people need to be able to see it and revisit and kind of look at the history of the artist and stuff. So I think it's important to still have those connections and keep building those. Have gallery events and things like that. So I don't want to come off in any way that I'm judging anybody. Our stories are ours to tell. The experience, for instance, of John Park and what stories he was telling there about floors. Those are conversations. We didn't even get into the fact that there's a whole bunch on secondary. I've never sold, I don't think, the PF piece I sold on secondary, but I've got over 1,000 pieces, and I'm like, I still have to. I'm year 5. I'm going to be. Maybe I'll start selling some of those works that I collected on secondary, because that's a whole other thing I haven't even unpacked yet. So it's a learning curve, right? How are we doing? So I think keep learning. That's my only message, and that's what I'm doing.
Love it. Keep learning. And the secondary market is an important point. I did mention kind of the royalties and the ability to actually see what's happening in your secondary market and ongoing into the future forevermore, right, when it comes to selling those. But definitely, I think that, and maybe a collector conversation is maybe another one we're going to have in the near future, because that's an interesting conversation around when to put your NFTs up for sale as a collector. Personally, my main rule of thumb when it comes to secondary, which I do list stuff for secondary here and there, is I always put it at a minimum of 4x whatever I paid for it. And of course, I always make sure that the royalties are checked on and that there are royalties going back to the original creator. But the reason I put it at 4x is not really because I want a big payday. It's because A, I usually love the piece and I don't want to let go of it easily. So if you're going to buy it from me, you're going to pay, a good markup price. And then B, at that multiplier, generally the actual revenue, or the 10% that you're getting back, is obviously much bigger, right? So generally you're getting a bigger amount of royalties back when you sell it at a higher amount. And I have been lucky enough to sell some one-of-one art pieces in the secondary market, and it's always really an exciting thing for me personally. Obviously making money's nice, but on the flip side, the artist likes to see a little bit of secondary market action, at least in my experience. Maybe not all artists. Some artists might not want to see as much of that, but it's been a pretty cool thing when you sell on the secondary, and being able to have that conversation with the original creator when that happens is pretty cool. And I don't want to lose sight of the indigenous culture piece, specifically Tipi, on what you've created here, and the fact that you are connected, like you said, to your tribe and to your local community there. How are you navigating the conversation about blockchain technology, specifically looking at the indigenous context? And do you see a great avenue for yourself and your community to really create some change, essentially, and bring some needed visibility and even maybe financial support to the community through blockchain?
Oh, just very quickly, I don't want to belabor my points. I think that a lot of the signaling of the community, and when we looked at layer 2, proof of work versus proof of stake, or the conversations that started at the very beginning of NFT building in 2021, there was a lot of hashtags of clean NFTs and things like that. There was pushback. I'm not an advocate of that kind of signaling. That I think it's alienating people. It's adding judgment to people that maybe haven't been equipped with all the information. So I think for me, having conversations where Indigenous communities can be part of that building, where we're saying, hey, is there a way that this economy can be uplifted with blockchain technology? For instance, some of the minting processes, some of the baking processes for Tezos, whatever it is. Are we utilizing the communities that can be uplifted? There was, African communities that were looking to build baking sites on Tezos. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us as representatives internationally to find where we fit in, make sure our economies matter, whether or not you're from the north or you're from Southeast Asia or where you are. So I think that's happening. And so that's my plan, is try to figure out how I can specifically target maybe some of the northern communities here where, that heat from those fans
No doubt.
for any of the technology that we're using is being utilized in a meaningful way.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're here for it. And I agree. It's definitely exciting, and empowerment is the word, right? And being able to really be financially empowered and financially sovereign with your creativity, not relying on any other middle people. So Marco, same question to you. I know you've mentioned your Bitcoin magazine is very cool, historic illumination project. So that's exciting. But anything else you really have around the corner that you're really excited about, you're most looking forward to this year? I don't know if you want to speak to your interview series as well. That interview you did with people was really cool. So yeah, just love to hear about anything you're kind of really excited about or looking forward to around the corner.
Yeah, I'm just most excited about taking this idea of these illuminated books to a wider audience and getting more awareness around them, because I really think that this is kind of a new art category that could spawn from just so many rare, valuable books that are not being appreciated and can be turned into, beautiful visualized artworks. I am very excited to be painting in California for the first time next month. I got invited to speak at SAP, give a graduation speech actually for their engineering academy. So I'm going to be doing some live painting throughout their few days, giving a graduation speech and painting at one of their local charities, painting at a wedding coming up, painting a mental health awareness walk. Basically at the finish line, we'll be asking people on May 19th in New York City, if anyone's around, but at the NAMI walk, we'll be asking people what mental health means to them, and then taking their words and responses and painting a giant mural at the finish line. I love being able to be creative in many different ways, whether it's books, working with the kids, painting murals, creating, fine art, digital art. I just feel that, success for me is continuing that creative expression in all those ways. And also very much looking forward to your 200th episode and to see how we all have matured.
Oh, yes, eventually. Exciting. Thank you, Marco. I appreciate that. And it's really, really eye-opening the way that you've kind of navigated the space and the way that you're really leaning on the social impact piece and the education and bringing it to the kids in the schools. So it's really cool. And congrats on the California art space and really just all those different art gigs. I can't imagine what that's like, but the artist's life is you got opportunities. You never know what's going to come tomorrow, right?
Yeah, very true.
Awesome. So is there anything else you want to share before we wind down here? Anything that you want the listeners to hear before we wrap up?
Ooh, I just wanted to add, because Marco just mentioned mental health awareness, and I actually have a piece which was an homage to my twin sister that is on for the entire month of May for mental health awareness with Peace Inside and Sheila Darcy. So that's in NYC this for the month of May. So I just wanted to say, that's something that I'm passionate about as well, and really work towards kind of making sure we're walking and telling our stories in a way that's meaningful. I think it's the creative journey, right? Try to figure out how do we do this without keeping it together. So it's there's a lot of stories to tell and a lot of ways that we support each other. So.
Amazing. Shout out to Sheila Darcy. And that's not the one on Zora. That would be a different one. Please share the link and I'll make sure we have it in our description below the episode and in the episode description, so we can share a link with the audience and they can go check that out as well. But yeah, Sheila Darcy using art for healing. I love it.
No, that's not the one on Zora. No.
Cool. Well, please share the link and then we'll get it in the description. Marco, any final thoughts as we wind up here?
Just very grateful for you, grateful for the space, grateful for what you've done. You've really taught me a lot and inspired me. I feel like that's a beautiful mutual feeling, and just stay creative, stay informed, and I love what Tipi said, keep learning. I always say keep creating, but I feel like both of those are kind of hand in hand, so it's kind of a beautiful way to end this series.
Let's go. Keep learning, keep creating. I'm so grateful to both of you. Yes, we are celebrating the 100th episode. For anyone who wants to check out our NFT gallery, you can go to www.web3warriors.io. It's a NFT gallery, corner of the metaverse, very cool kind of nostalgic gamer vibes there. And you can also go to web3warriors.tez.page to find our corner of the metaverse in the Voxels metaverse, which is where I'm hanging out here and where we always hang out every Saturday when we're live. And we will have this, of course, live streaming on Twitch and YouTube and live on the podcast networks by May 12th. And again, just thank you to all of our listeners and audience who have brought us this far. We're looking forward to more amazing guests. We're going to have Eunice on the show next, who's another artist that actually met in NYC while there for NFT.NYC. We like to bring those kind of connections onto the show and really showcase interesting use cases. She's an artist, a DJ, and just a really creative, amazing person. So really looking forward to having her as our next episode 101. And again, thank you, Marco. Thank you, Tipi. Until next time, we'll catch you all in the metaverse. Peace out. Take care.